Hear that? That's the sound of your horsepower dying. Last week, I told you the Muncie aluminum case stretches like a rubber band. Today, I'm going to show you exactly where it breaks and exactly how to fix it. This is a hardened steel bushing. It costs about 40 bucks. And this little ring is the difference between a transmission that explodes at the starting line and one that handles 500 foot-pounds of torque for a lifetime. GM didn't install these because they were cheap. You're going to install them because you're smart. We're not buying a new transmission today. We're performing surgery. We're going to armor plate the weak points of the Muncie 4-speed, delete the flex, and build the Super Muncie that Zora Duntov wished he had. Let's get to work. The failure point, anatomy of the case stretch. Every Muncie that grenades itself tells the same story. Stripped gears, shattered teeth, and everyone blames the gears themselves, like the metallurgy just gave up. Wrong. The gears didn't fail, the case did, and it failed in the most predictable way possible. The countershaft pin is the entire load-bearing structure for your cluster gear. Every single pound of torque your engine makes gets transferred through this pin into two holes in the aluminum case, one in the front, one in the rear. And here's the problem. That pin is hardened steel, and those holes are soft aluminum. Under torque, especially during a first gear launch, those helical gears are trying to push apart. The axial thrust we talked about last week, it's being transferred directly into that steel pin, and that pin is acting like a wedge, slowly crushing the soft aluminum board downward and rearward with every shift, every launch, every pull. The symptom is called egg shaping. The 1-inch bore in the front of the case starts to elongate. It becomes oval. And once that hole is no longer perfectly round, your countershaft is no longer parallel to your main shaft. The gear mesh changes from deep root contact where it's supposed to be to tip contact where it's not. And when you're putting 400 foot-pounds of torque on the very tip of a gear tooth, catastrophic failure. The tooth snaps, the gear strips, and everyone blames weak gears when the real problem was a loose case the entire time. This is why high-horsepower Muncies don't last. It's not the gears, it's the aluminum holes the gears are spinning in. So how do you fix a case that's designed to fail? You change the material interface. You stop letting steel crush aluminum, and you make it steel on steel instead. The modification is simple in concept but requires precision in execution. You machine the front countershaft hole oversize, typically to 1 1/8 of an inch. Then you install a step-flanged hardened steel bushing with an interference fit. That means it's pressed in tight, no wiggle, no movement, locked in place. Here's why this works and why it completely changes the physics of the transmission. First, you've changed the load path from steel on aluminum to steel on steel. The pin is no longer crushing soft case material. It's bearing against hardened steel that can take the abuse. Second, the flange on the bushing increases the contact patch against the case face. Instead of all that force concentrating on a 1-inch diameter hole, it's now distributed across a larger surface area. The pin can't walk forward, it can't shift, it stays exactly where it's supposed to be. Third, and this is the part people don't think about, a tight interference fit actually restores the structural integrity of that borehole better than factory specs. You're not just fixing the problem, you're making it stronger than it was when it rolled off the assembly line in 1967. The parts cost is minimal, 40 bucks for the bushing. The labor is machine shop time. And if your case is already wallowed out, if those holes are already oval from years of abuse, this modification makes that case better than new. You're not throwing it away, you're rebuilding it stronger. But the second weakness, the aluminum snout, because the Muncie has another flex point that kills transmissions, the front bearing retainer. On a stock Muncie, the nose cone that your throwout bearing rides on is made of the same soft aluminum as the case. Two things happen here. First, the aluminum galls. It gets sticky. This makes your clutch feel heavy and inconsistent. But the real killer is flex. This retainer is what clamps your input bearing to the case. Under the violent vibration of a V8, the aluminum deforms. It lets the input bearing walk in the bore. Once the input shaft is walking, your gear mesh goes out the window and you're back to snapping teeth. The fix is a cast iron bearing retainer. It costs about $50, and just like the bushing, it changes the physics of the transmission. Cast iron is rigid. It acts like a clamp that refuses to let go of that input bearing. It locks the front of the transmission down, so the input shaft stays perfectly centered no matter how hard you launch. Plus, the throwout bearing glides on cast iron way smoother than aluminum, so it's not only stronger, but your clutch pedal actually feels better. You're adding structural rigidity to the front of the case and bushings to the bottom of the case. You're essentially building an iron skeleton inside an aluminum body. So, let's put this in perspective. What did you just build? The factory M22 rock crusher has strong gear angles. It resists case-splitting loads. But let's be honest about the trade-off: noise and harshness. It whines on the highway, it rattles at idle because of the loose lash, and it feels like agricultural equipment in traffic. A bushed Muncie M21, let's call it the Super Muncie because it sounds cool and it gives you the best of both worlds. You get the quiet, smooth operation of helical gears that you actually want to drive, but because of the bushings, you finally have the case rigidity to handle the heavy thrust loads that usually kill them. And with that cast iron front retainer, the input shaft stays locked in position. For a street car making under 600 horsepower, this combination is superior to a factory M22 in every practical way. It's enjoyable to drive because you don't need earplugs. It shifts smoother because the synchros aren't fighting a flexing case, and it lasts longer because the structural weak points, the aluminum bores, have been armored with steel. You just built the transmission GM should have made. You took the civilized nature of the M21's helical gears and you deleted the case stretch problem that made them vulnerable. This is what smart racing shops were doing in the 70s when they needed a Muncie to actually survive on the street. They weren't chasing rock crusher casting numbers. They were bushing cases and installing iron front retainers. Here's the bottom line. If your Muncie case is already wallowed out, if those countershaft holes are egg-shaped and loose, do not throw it away. Bushing it makes it better than new. You're not compromising, you're upgrading. If you're building a street car and you want a manual transmission that sounds good, shifts great, and actually survives, stop chasing the rock crusher noise. Chase structural rigidity instead. Get an M20 or M21 case, have it bushed and blueprinted, install a cast iron front bearing retainer, and you'll have a transmission that handles modern horsepower levels with vintage aesthetics. The M22 became a legend because of marketing and mythology. The M21 became a legend because of engineering and metallurgy. One sounds cool at car shows, the other is still shifting gears when the car show is over. Now that the case is bulletproof, you need to know about the one oil mistake that ruins these bronze synchros in less than 500 miles. The chemistry behind synchro wear is something GM never explained, and most builders still get it wrong today. We can attempt to break it down in the next video.